Happy Sunday, and welcome back to Retake the Week. It's been another busy week of Counter-Strike, and we're here to take you back through it all and give our thoughts and opinions. Up and coming on this show, we've got, of course, the member Q&A. It's that time of the month. The small site Retake, King's Tiers, and the classic segments will all still be involved. Before I introduce my co-host, who you should all be familiar with, and before we get into the juicy details, remember that this show is brought to you by the members. Without members, we wouldn't be doing this. Well, we would. It just wouldn't be anywhere near as fun or as viable. Let's put it that way. We probably would have missed a few episodes. We wouldn't be as committed, I think, to being here every Sunday talking Counter-Strike. So yes, behind-the-scenes access for members includes interviews with coaches and other members of staff from the Tier 2 scene primarily, behind-the-scenes content for this show itself, extra prospects content. That means prospect demos, the ability to vote on prospect topics, and yeah, any little juicy tidbits I want to drop for behind the scenes access will be there for members only. But all right, Quacke, it's been 7 days since we've spoken. We don't speak outside of making this show, obviously. We don't actually like each other. How you been doing?
I've been doing good. It's been a good week. It's been a very good week actually. I played Dust 2 hosted a small online tournament. Actually, okay, like I think the highlight of my week was like Thursday to Friday because on Thursday we had Dust 2 Sweden hosted a small online event, and because I wasn't admitting it, I played. And we actually did really fucking well. We actually went like 10-8 up against a bunch of players who were on NIP's new Swedish Academy. And basically they were a little bit like, they weren't like full trolling, but some rounds they were like throw out the Negev and stuff, but like we still won both pistols. Like we had a 5-7 half, took it up to 10-8, and then at the end they were like, okay, like when we were up 8-9 they were like, fuck, we have to eco and actually go for like a proper buy and actually try hard for the rest of this game to close it, and they did. But yeah, that was really fun. They were really nice about it. We had a really fun thing. My teammate changed his Faceit nickname to Queef in all capital letters in Swedish, which was extremely funny, because we had this game casted on the main broadcast. And yeah, no, but then that was kind of that. And then Friday, I was just like, I haven't seen Lord of the Rings. I'm gonna watch the extended cut with my friends in Discord of like the first movie.
With your
So
friends in Discord? That sounds awful.
no, because it was great because we like all of us were watching the movie with a screen share, obviously. So like we were all like having breakfast and like having a chat, and it was really nice. It was really nice. All morning. And that was my Friday. And then
Okay.
yeah, since then I've literally just been vibing. I haven't done shit. I've had this weekend off, and yeah.
All right. Well,
Feels good.
I
Good
can
CS as well.
recommend
We had good CS.
I can recommend if you want to watch the entirety of the extended cut. It only takes about 12 hours. I have done it in a cinema before. Maybe find one near you that's doing it. Yeah. I went to a cinema, watched all three back to back. It was a movie marathon that went from 10 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. Because of breaks between
Holy
between the actual movies. And yeah, that was a great use of an entire Sunday or a Saturday. I think that
yeah.
was a good day. A good damn day.
I'm gonna I'm gonna finish the trilogy, and it is gonna be the extended cut.
Mhm.
Obviously, now that I've already started that, but yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna do the next two movies back to back. I might do like different days maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll be as addicted as I was. Going to be honest. Going to have to go through and watch it. But let's start off with the Q&A. That's where we begin the show. And our first question comes from Monster, a coach, FlyQuest Red, and he's got, well, a question that I feel like a lot of us know the answer to. Thoughts on the Blast Astralis Bro Saga? Is there a 1% chance Astralis slash Blast are in the right? I do kind of have to concede. Maybe there's a sub 1% chance that Bro's agent is full of shit and that he was actually ill, but no, obviously not. This is Astralis and Blast. We know historically they've been intertwined and have been rat fucking bastards, and I don't see why that would have magically changed for this one incident. Like, Quack, do you see any grace that can be given over to these two people? Maybe just one or the other, but certainly not both.
I think there's a little bit of leeway you can give to Blast, at least for like the first half of the saga, because like they said, they the procedure they normally have is they take the team's statements at face value. Like they don't want to pry and be like, are they really sick? Are they really unfit? Are they what's wrong? What's wrong with them? Like, are they, how mentally ill are they? Like that sort of thing. They don't want to do that. So they just trust the teams and go on like of face value. And Astralis lied. As we said, maybe Bro and his agent are absolutely full of shit, and maybe I guess the 1% scenario is that Bro and his agent faked an illness to Astralis to get out of Astralis, but there's no fucking way
Yeah.
they did that. Because the thing is, even if he was sick, Astralis would just play with Rugga. They had Rugga registered as coach. They didn't need a medical substitution for Cadian. They still applied for it, and Blast still said yes, because that was also in a financial incentive to them. And I don't think it is the fact that they have the same shareholders. I think this is a bit. I don't think that's what has taken this over the line. But I think you said it quite well last week. It's the biggest Danish team with a Danish TO in Copenhagen, where they have struggled in the past to get viewership. Like they had to move away from the Royal Arena, and now they're doing it in. I think they're doing it in Focus, because they couldn't fill the Royal Arena the previous times they've been there.
Mm.
Despite the Astralis being in attendance. So like they need the tickets, and let's be honest, how many Danish fans will stay in the arena if they're watching Rugga play a quarterfinal? So like,
Oh, with Rugger, do they make a quarterfinal? Like they didn't
yeah, no,
make it
I mean they
without
don't.
him. Imagine with him in the
Yeah,
team.
so I think it's kind of it was in aside from the thing blowing up, I think it was in the best interest for both of them to do it this way, because Astralis obviously have better chances with their main lineup, and
Yep,
Blast probably get better viewership if Astralis get to debut with their main lineup at their event. So
correct.
that's yeah. They're not in the right. Astralis lied,
Oh
and when
no.
it was kind of found out they lied, Blast just stuck their head in the sand and went, "We're not going to check this." And now they passed it on to ESEC. Nothing's going to happen. I think there's a chance we get like a symbolic fine for Astralis for doing this, and nothing else, because yeah, nothing else is going to happen. I don't necessarily know what else could happen. It doesn't really matter if you disqualify them from the event, because they came last.
Yeah.
They already got a deduction in prize money and like revenue share.
I mean,
So
just
I mean,
withhold
yeah,
all
they
of
don't
it at
really
that
give a
point,
fuck.
I guess. Just take all of it from them. But it's still
Do
like
they care?
they
Yeah.
are pretty much the evil empire of Danish Counter-Strike. They are the strongman dictator of Danish Counter-Strike as well. Like they got that sort of energy where it's like it doesn't matter what everyone else thinks about them within their own bubble. They're so good at controlling the
Yeah.
narrative, like placating the people. Oh, look at our special Astralis Nexus shop, guys. Oh, look, there's a branded car and you can get t-shirts. Like they have essentially tricked and coerced an entire generation of Danish children into loving them anyway. So it's not going to really matter to them as long as they remain number one in Denmark. No one's going to start watching Gaming Gladiators or TSM or any of these other Danish rosters over them, because they're essentially controlling the narrative. So not much we can do in terms of kicking them off their high horse or getting them sort of deposed within their own country. It's just going to keep being the case that they are pieces of shit, but remain on top. Right, next up, we've got a pair of questions, quite amusingly from ZedButNotDead, who asked a question on the Q&A post, but also on the last behind the scenes video, which was also named Q&A, because I wanted people to ask questions there if they found it, give some options. But he asked two of them, and we'll start with the first one. Who are the most underrated players from the pre-Astralis era? Quack, do you have any takes on this? Because I know you started watching Counter-Strike seriously more like 2019-ish, and I'd say the pre-Astralis era probably ends at 2017, maybe halfway through 2018 at most. Do you have any thoughts on this? Is anyone you think you hear about as not being great, then you look back and think, wow, actually, you did all of this?
You can start, because I think I have a few names, but I have to look up some things.
Okay. So my first
Yeah.
thought is the way I want to do this, because I personally don't pay attention to other people's thoughts on players, like how they rate them, because I have a giant ego, a lot of opinions, and frankly don't have time. But the way I see it is I think, what about a player who definitely was great, did a lot of great things, but probably didn't receive the accolades that have lasted through time, like the MVPs, the HLTV top whatever medals, and also had a bit of a career post, Astralis era that was massively disappointing, at least by most people who has watched standards. And the player that came to mind for me was NBK. If you watched French Counter-Strike from, I'm talking about as way back as Source, like 2010, 2009, potentially even further back that I don't know about. I'm not the esports historian here. He was an absolute beast of a fragger going all the way back to then, all the way through till about probably 2015 when he joins the envious kind of super team and becomes more of a supportive element. Still a really good fragger, but nowhere near as much as he was in his good old days. When you consider the fact that post this sort of French boom, post being the kingmaker who won both French majors, you know, he really did fall off. In the Vitality lineups he did play with briefly, he wasn't a particularly respected face. The OG product, the OG experiment fell to bits really quickly, and he didn't receive a lot of credit for any of the minor success they had. You know, it was always, oh, Alexi B made this work. They had a couple talented players. NBK, can we replace him? And I feel like that's kind of warped the narrative around who he is. He was a monster fragger who was one of the most reliable support pieces in the French scene for years, won 2 majors, and really deserves to be considered amongst the pantheons of great players. I just don't think a lot of people are going to be able to see him that way, especially given now that he's playing like Tier 2 CS, he's playing in Revenant. Most people, they've either not thought about him in years or consider him washed and a guy who just kind of exists. He's not regarded the same way. So I think NBK is probably the right answer for me, especially given how much I used to love watching him play and believed in him on these big rosters.
That's a good shout, yeah. That's a very good shout, I think. I think about players like, I do think someone like AZ could be up there, because I think AZ is kind of underrated in, you know, in general, even now. But the peak of his career definitely came before the Astralis kind of era. He still had good periods even after that, and I think he's always been on, ever since then, he's always had very shit kind of teams. But he still put up pretty good numbers, I think. So he's done a pretty good job. But I think if I'm gonna go for a pick, a slightly more out there take, I think someone who came to my mind actually is Twist, the Swedish Twist, because in that sort of like 2018 and before era, for like 5 years, Twist was like very solidly putting up numbers in Sweden, and a lot of different teams wanted him. For the like NIP wanted him for a long time, Fnatic wanted him for a long time. He just said no because he wanted to play with his mates for a long time, which kind of sucks for your career prospects. But then eventually he ends up on these teams maybe a bit too late, and he just doesn't really work out. NIP also, that period was kind of rough because he was very much forced into support positions, and I think NIP is the last thing people remember about Twist. He's still around, and he still does a pretty good job. I think he did a good job on Finest. I think he does a good job on Alliance. But he's like the the memory of Twist today is very much below average, I think. But prior to that, he was actually a very good player in like that sort of 2015 to 18 period. And I think that's someone who kind of fits the category if I'm gonna pick someone like that. So I think, yeah, I think that might be my choice. Yeah.
So Twist is funny because he was always brought up every time Swedish teams started to have a bit of a dip, because they were pretty dominant early in Counter-Strike. There was always a question of who's the next talent you can bring up, who's the next best player in Sweden, and it was always Twist in that conversation. It's just that it was a very clear, publicly known thing that he wanted to play with his friends. He didn't care for playing on the best teams, and I think 2015, that's not even the start of it. We're going back, like him playing on Lemon Dogs in 2012 to 2013.
Yeah.
Like there, he was considered a really explosive fragger, a great talent, probably, maybe even just in terms of raw talent, aim, these sorts of things, could have even been the best Swedish player at various points. He just never really got.
Yeah.
He never got himself going in terms of his career. He never got into the right teams. Maybe he just sucked at the whole networking aspect. But realistically, just based on what we know, he didn't think Counter-Strike was the career for him, it seems. And instead, it's just become, I mean, almost reluctantly, what he does full time. But at the time, yeah, he definitely could have been in a much bigger team.
Yeah, I think Peter said I think it was Peter said on our Lead Speak episode that they wanted to get him into NIP as early as 2014. It might have been Threat, actually, now that I think about it. But yeah, they wanted him in 2014. He said no, and then they persistently tried to get him until they got him in 2019. Because he just either said no or like it wasn't really a good timing for him. So yeah, that could have been a very different career. I think that was a good pick for me for one of the most underrated players from the pre-Astralis era. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's a
definitely. Yeah.
question.
The next part of the question, well, there's two questions from the same person. So the next question ZedButNotDead has asked is, who is the donk comparison in traditional sports? And I have personally struggled the most with this because I have to stick to a direct comparison. I need a teenager who comes into and realistically, like, these guys aren't tier 1, but like somewhere within the top divisions of a sport, and immediately is insanely dominant. Like, breaks the game borderline. And the few examples that come to mind are always going to be football related, because I need, those pretty key factors to be brought in. Teenager, breaks the game. And the two names that I'm currently struggling with, because I'm not sure how perfectly they line up, just because they were probably more successful as teenagers than Donk has been. I mean, he's won Kato, don't get me wrong, but if he doesn't win a major this year, these guys probably would have done a bit better. And the first one is Pele. Pele, as a teenager, wins the World Cup with Brazil, leads them in goals scored, ends up breaking goal-scoring records at the time, some of which were a bit fake. Some of those Santos friendly matches definitely don't count, bud. But still, even without the ridiculous inflation to get him to 1,000, still ends up scoring basically a goal a game his entire career, and pretty much is the GOAT. Like, he's considered one of those 3-4 players who are eligible for greatest of all time recognition. The other example I thought of was potentially Messi. I thought I have more familiarity with how he played, and he was, if I watch football at the time, a reincarnation of Maradona, sure, but no one else could do that. No one else could have been able to do it since Maradona, and if you look at him now, there's no one who actually plays like him in his prime. So those are the two options I thought of. Someone who's new, young, vibrant, really different to watch. Plus, Messi was small, had a shit haircut that was like too long. It's kind of, I can see it working. It's just, I always feel a bit goofy making these comparisons to players who I've seen their entire career, when all I've seen from Donk is a year. I've seen 1 year of Donk. He needs to do a lot more to really earn the full comparison in my eyes.
I think in that sense, there's another player, current football player you can pick, because we have, in the same way we haven't seen where Donk goes in the next 5 years. We don't know if he goes Messi or if he just goes,
Oh, I think I know
average.
where you're going. I think it's a good one.
Lamine Yamal is where I was gonna go. Because he just came in. I can't. It's kind of crazy for a 17-year-old to. I don't know. I can't remember if he scored a goal in the final, but he definitely played in the Euros final and scored in the Euros playoffs.
He scored against France.
As a
I remember
17-year-old.
that.
Yeah, as a 17-year-old in the Spanish national football team. Also, just kind of came out of nowhere in Barcelona.
Yeah. No, I especially because he was
And
on their academy as well. I mean, so was Messi on
yeah,
Barcelona's academy, but still, it's a
there's
part of
there's
it.
two others as well who I had down, because the other sport I follow more closely is motorsports.
Okay.
He very much lines up with Max Verstappen, because Max Verstappen very much, he didn't come straight into the dominant level, so to speak. He didn't come straight into Red Bull, but he was up there quite fast. And even when he was in the lower teams, he was very much, that's very much the end of 2023 spirit kind of level. Playing, because he was putting that Toro Rosso car in places it shouldn't be, in the same way Donk maybe put the early days of that spirit team in, event winning positions against Virtus Pro. That
Yeah.
sort of position. Someone maybe more new, someone who's definitely coming straight into the limelight next year and has very high expectations. There is an Italian kid called Kimi Antonelli, who you may have heard of, who I think he might be born in the same year as both Lamine Yamal and Donk, which is 2007. I think he might be. He's coming straight in to replace Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes car next year. Confirmed. This fucking kid is people are like, he has been insane all of his junior career. He has basically won every, like, aside from this year's season in Formula 2, which has been very weird, and the team he is in It's like it's this weird situation. The team he's in has always been the best, but now they've been shit this season, like entirely, mechanical issues
Right.
and everything. Um, aside from this year in Formula 2, I think he's come into every single series he's participated in and won the majority of races or something crazy like that. Like he has been sweet, like he has absolutely cleaned house in every single thing he's competed in. And he's not going to win the Formula 2 World Championship this year because the car is fucking him over, and he's still going straight into Mercedes as they want him to be the next Max Verstappen. They want him to be a replacement worthy of Lewis Hamilton. That I think if that plays out and in the next year, Kimi Antonelli ends up winning races in Formula One in a Mercedes, that's a donk. That's a donk timeline for sure. Because this
Okay.
fucking kid, he was in karts like 3 years ago. So yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Pretty good.
yeah,
I like that. I like that comparison a lot.
yeah,
Glad we got something outside of football. But yeah, the problem is, yeah, the big narratives. If you live in the UK, like even if you don't want to follow football, you follow football. So there's always going to be the easiest place to go. But next question is, well, an interesting one.
Actually, hang on. You
All right, where are
you
we
said
going with
you
this?
said I think you know who I'm gonna pick. Who do you think I was
I
gonna
honestly
pick?
thought you were going to go
For
Haaland.
football.
I thought Haaland was coming through because
Oh,
he's not
this is a good
actually
pick.
won the big thing. So, he's Norwegian. He's never going to win a Euro or a World Cup. He'll have an inspiring semi-final run at one of those events at some point, and it's going to go down in history.
Yeah,
But realistically, those nations can't win those big tournaments. So I thought maybe that because
Z-
goal scoring kind of is like taking opening kills. I think it's not
yeah.
the only thing that
Zlatan
wins the
could be that
game, but it is
maybe as
pretty
well.
much the most important thing. And so I
Yeah,
thought that's where you're going with that. But no, it's fine. I like where you went with it.
yeah.
They're pretty good, especially Yamal. It didn't come to
Zlatan
my
might be that
mind.
as well. Yeah,
Oh,
Zlatan also hasn't won the big shit.
yeah, well, Swedish, isn't it? He's
Yeah.
trash at football. But next question. Um, this one is, unfortunately, this one's not going to take long to answer. By when do you think a female player will have cracked the upper echelon of Counter Strike? I've had to make my opinion clear on this stuff for a long time. We have separate men's and women's Counter Strike events. I think that will remain forever. The real question is, will we ever see a women's league or women's event or women's circuit that actually receives not necessarily comparable viewership to tier one games, but at least that will blow up in the terms of its viewership, much like the WNBA has this season, just because of one superstar, but still. Will we ever see that level
Mm.
of viewership explosion, public interest in the women's scene? That's a different question. I do not ever think we'll have a female player who's actually in the upper echelons of Counter Strike, just in terms of ability. I don't think that's possible, just because I haven't seen anything to indicate that it can be done. Prove me wrong, aspiring female gamers. I
Yeah.
just don't think it's going to happen.
I think it is possible. I think it's gonna take because my opinion is that it's very much a cultural issue. I think as long as we need way more women to play Counter Strike to have a reasonable chance of one of them making it into a top team. Because right now it is, you know, I'm not saying it needs to be 50-50, but it needs to be pretty fucking close to 50-50 if we're talking gender spread. And I think there's a chance we get there one day soon. There's absolutely a chance we don't get there at all. This community is not exactly conducive to women. They don't really like women in the Counter Strike community. If you if you ask the majority of people how many people have cursed out a girl in a matchmaking game at some point, all of Eastern Europe will say yes. So it's not exactly it's not it's we're far off from that, so that's why I think like it's gonna take a decade because like the female player base is growing, but it is gonna take a long fucking time until we have a lot of women playing Counter Strike, like where it's reasonable to find, like I think the ideal position would be that it's a reasonable chance every matchmaking game you queue you find at least one woman. That's like I think that's a reasonable level to reach at some point. It's gonna take a long time. And at that point, I think maybe there's enough women where somebody just gets that sort of shoot and finds their way onto a top 5 team, which can actually compete. I think there's a chance. But I also think, as you said, we up until that point, we absolutely benefit from having separate women's leagues, and even after that point, I think we do having a separate women's league, and that needs viewership. It needs viewership. It
Well,
definitely needs investment in viewership.
yeah, I mean, investment. Where they spend it is often the problem. But I also think that we just have statistical debunking of the idea that it's a pure cultural issue. We've had how many players from the Middle East who are not just good, but elite talents that we can clearly indicate play at a top level? There's 11 million people in the entire nation out of a player base of tens and hundreds of millions. Why couldn't, even if women are 0.5% of the total population, one of them would have made it? Like, in terms of the Counter-Strike population, one of them would be the exception that proves there is a chance. And I don't think that's happened. And the fact that it hasn't pretty much leaves us where we are. Like, you can't magically force it to happen. And I'm okay with that. I just rather we did women's events right. That's been kind of my whole thing, is that the actual Impact League events are pretty uninteresting to watch. They don't focus on a lot of narratives. They don't focus on player personalities. And they don't escape the bonds of, oh, it's women's CS, it's not as good. We don't care. Just make it fun. Make it interesting. Build stories, build intrigue. They never have, and it just kind of dies on its ass every season.
Yeah, and I still think, what the fuck are the other TOs doing? Like, where's Blast? Where's PGL? Where's CCT? Like, where? Fuck, I hate
Well,
CCT.
they don't have
but
$2 million worth of charity money from the Saudis to spend on it.
Just, I mean, an online women's league, that would be like it would do so much to have something next to EPL, because right now, or next to Impact, because right now the only things that exist are like, it's the Impact League, it's that traded thing which they do
Yeah,
every now and again, and
that's pretty
that's
cool.
it. The rest of the time they play like open and intermediate, these teams. Like, they don't really have, I think, more events would be nice. Give some competition to Impact League, force them to actually, why the fuck did they remove qualification slots for the main LAN event? What the fuck are they doing? Like, the Impact League for this season, actually, I feel like it regressed because we removed a bunch of qualification spots for the main event. Just add more, like put 12 teams in this event instead. I don't know. I just feel like there's no progression happening here, where it really needs to happen, because this season I think we have less org investment in this season's European Impact League than we had the last season, and that is like, that's a backward step, I think, because a bunch of orgs pulled out. A bunch of Russian orgs went like, well, we're not winning, so we're going to put out, and like, oh, the not even making playoffs, I guess. And G2 pulled out because they also never made playoffs, and like, you know,
Yeah, it's a small circuit with a very small LAN final. For those who don't know,
yeah,
only 8 teams play at the LAN finals, so it's quite
yeah.
cutthroat.
And for this season, they removed one North American spot, and I think they removed one South American spot as well. No, actually, there was only ever one South American spot, I think, but they
Yeah,
removed the only Asian spot, I think.
yeah, and the top Asian team are now playing in EU, but still,
Yeah,
it was always them
yeah,
qualifying.
like,
But yeah,
yeah, which is just fucking weird. Just make it, if you wanted more European spots, which I think was good. I think having 3 European spots out of an 8-team event was maybe a bit low.
yeah,
If you wanna have more European spots, why not just add like 2 or 4 more spots in total? Like, is it really that much of a hassle to run a 10-team or a 12-team event? Just run 3 groups, or like, just do something, because I feel like it just sucks for, the Americas. It sucks for Asia. Like, yeah. I
yeah.
just
I mean,
felt
it
like
sucks for them,
that
but
was
I think
maybe a backward
the
step.
biggest issue is I want to see good Counter Strike as best as it can be, and I want to see
Yeah.
competitive teams who actually like can build rivalries. No offense to anyone
Mm,
outside of FlyQuest Red and NA, I don't want to see you at LAN. I just don't. I
mm,
really don't.
mm.
I want to see more of these European teams who actually have histories, like players who have been rivals, who have been teammates going up against each other. These have been the more interesting teams to follow narratively. But yeah, let's move on to the next question, because we've addressed the actual question asked. And this is
Yeah.
from Excel, who has technically asked 3 questions, but they're of varying lengths. And the first one is the first real one. The other 2, I think, don't take very long to get through. So I am the GM of NIP. This is how the question's phrased. You are the GM of NIP. How do you make a roster that can make it into the major without breaking the bank? And I don't need to keep anyone. So if I'm trying not to break the bank, I kind of have to keep the majority of the players I currently have. For example, there's no budget like wrinkle replacement at all.
Mm.
And even if I did want to be an absolute hater and cut Rez and Isaac or whatever, I don't see how there's a cheap replacement for them that's guaranteed to get me into the major. I'm also assuming we're referring to this current major, but
Yeah.
making majors in general, this is a fairly young team. We haven't seen them with Mistem, so I can't really speak to long term how I'd treat it. But if it just
Uh,
this
we
major,
have. They lost in an open fire.
oh, they lost on open qualifier.
Yeah, we
We
have
haven't
seen them with
really
this
seen
team.
them. I haven't seen them play a damn game, a
Yeah.
single second. So no real clue in terms of that. I guess you could take a risk, take a flyer on a talented player, just pick one out of tier 2 or tier 3. Honestly, right now, I think this team has as good a chance as any you'd randomly smash together on a budget to make it through the RMR. Like, I'm not going to pretend I consider them heavy favorites to do it. I think they're underdogs going into matchups with a lot of the teams ranked below number 20, which is rough, but hey, that's just the reality of how they've been playing recently. And the fact they have a new IGL, all this stuff factoring in makes it rather difficult to believe in them. But I don't know. You could rip a player out of some team, but I just don't see it as a guaranteed upgrade. I think they've got like a 1 in 3 chance of making it out anyway. Maybe 1 in 4. Roll the dice, and then once we've seen them actually play, we can answer this question.
I think their major, like their chance of making this major range from anywhere between 30% and 80%. It just depends on how you draw the RMR. They could get 3 easy games and go 3-0. Or they could get really rough games and end up 1-3 or whatever.
Who are the easy games for them?
I think the way they're going to be actually let me check this real quick. But I think the way they're going to be seeded, I think they have a fairly easy opening game, so that's already 1-0.
Their opening games are going to be Fnatic, Bait, Namigo, or Sinners, basically. Like they're a mid-table bunch, so they're probably going to be seeded against them or Big Sangal 3D Max, at best Cloud9 or
yeah, it should
BetBoon.
be
Who's
Bait.
the
It
easy
should be
game for them?
Bait. It should be Bait. I'm pretty sure if this ranking stays, with this going off of HLTV ranking, this isn't exactly perfect. I think it is one of those out of those bunch. I think if they got Sinners, that was a very good draw. I think a lot of these, like, they should beat a lot of these teams. I find it hard to imagine that if they end up in a last place game against Unity or Eklot, they go out. I just don't think so. But then of course they have to make through. I just think, like, if they end up drawing with like only teams out of this lower half, then I think NIP definitely make it through.
That's the problem.
Because they are
historically, there's zero basis for that because they've managed to lose to Monty, Gun5, Amcal, Passion UA all within the last 2 months. Like, these are not guaranteed wins for this team. They are very weak.
I just think it's a bit. I just think, yeah, they are very weak. That's just what I mean. Like, I would give them good chances to make it through there. I just think I would, because on LAN I think it's a different thing. Remember that, like, a lot of these teams are LAN debutants. It's going to be very, very difficult. Or a few of them anyway. And some of these players. Like, I just think that's going to be a bit of a different thing. Anyway, that's not the point. I think the question is phrased a little bit weird because this team definitely can make the major. So you don't have to make any changes to make them put them into the
theory,
major.
yeah.
And I think, as you said, especially on a budget right now, I don't think I would change the core of Rez, Wrinkle, and Maxter, because those are 3 players. I think Rez and Wrinkle sort of speak for themselves. When they hit, and when they hit, they definitely make the major. And then Maxter is like, yeah, you can swap him out for another tier 2 kid, but like, he is a tier 2 kid who was good in tier 2. Like, you're not really moving the needle here. You're just doing the same thing once again if you change him out for someone cheap. If you put him in like, if you put someone like, I don't know, Buzz into there, I think you have exactly the same chance of doing anything.
I think your odds go down, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe no,
I believe in Maxter's
at
talent.
best.
As much as he's had a terrible 3 months, just in terms of his numbers, I
Yeah.
think he is a more talented player than Buzz. Like,
at best, I don't think you can change anything here. If you go for a tier 2 player and to like try to improve on Maxter, because he was that for a while. And then you have the rest, like Mistem, I guess, is the one it hinges on. Mistem, but I also don't have a good replacement for Mistem. On a budget, I mean, I could. How big is Hooksy's buyout at a G2?
yeah.
We'll see. I also think Mistem is good. I think they've also brought him up into a system where he should be relatively comfortable because he's got his old coach. Because Mistem has played with Spray XT for a long time, and that's been, every good result they've had together, and I think that's a good pairing. He has him with him as an assistant coach. So I think there's a lot of things that could go right about Mistem. We just don't know yet. And then Isak is like, Isak has made the major. Like, he's made the major twice. He made a major
It was
final, even if it
all
was a bit
him.
fluky, it was a bit bullshitty. He still made the major final. Like, he's absolutely a guy who can make the major. And also, I don't think this team hinges on him in any way. Like, there's nobody you could replace Isak with. There's nobody you could realistically replace Isak with who would greatly improve your chance of making the major. So I think they're fine in that regard for now. Um, Not sure about the IGL change just before an RMR because that is so make or break.
It
But
really is, yeah.
that I don't know shit. I think Threat and Exist know way more about how this team looks on the inside than I do. So until I'm proven different, until I'm, you know, disproven on that, I'm gonna trust in Mistem. So
Yeah, I think that's fair.
yeah,
Essentially, even though we have very differing views on how good this NIP team is relative to this competition, I still think we agree on the fact that there's no change you make that improve their odds. Their odds are, I mean, you have them higher than I do, but it's still like there's nothing you can really do right now for this major. And in the future, I really hope they do keep this as it is. Like you keep Mistem, you keep working with
yeah.
Maxter and Wrinkle, Isak, whatever. I don't not too attached to him, but and if Rez continues to be
Um,
the most disappointing Swedish
mm,
man in the history of the 3 Swedish people I know, just
mm.
promote someone from the academy. Go make ex Casper Sky full time and take a risk and actually have some patience. I don't know if that's possible. Try that, but
Yeah.
this major, it's not
Um,
much we can do.
I think if they seeded it on today's Valve ranking, which they won't, it is going to change. But they're very much in that sort of middle seeding area where they're going to
Yeah,
be, particularly in the middle. They're going to have a fairly 50-50 opening game, I think, ranking wise, which is also it's both a blessing and a curse because you also have a good chance of then ending up with like the other middle seeds. You have a good chance of having mostly 50-50 games at that point, which is, if you are a team who can step up at the RMR compared to your regular level, that's an advantage because you're probably going to win most of those
if
games. If you aren't a team who do that, well, then you have a 50% chance of making the major, and that's not exactly perfect. So we'll see. They'll play teams like Bet Boom Sangle, Big, Bait is in there, I think, as well. Aurora. In the late games, they might end up with like Saw, Heroic, Falcons,
yeah, very
which
losable
is, I
games.
mean, NIP and Heroic, we already saw in a studio event earlier this year. They should have lost both of them, but it was also still pretty damn close. I can't remember if both of them were. I
Yeah,
can't remember if both of them were 3 mappers, but
at least one of them was.
they played it. They played. They're
Oh, they
two
both were.
shit teams. Like they play.
Technically,
Yeah,
technically
there's a
they were.
lot of teams, and there's a lot of teams in this sort of space where NIP are that are just like them. Shit. Like they should be better, but they're shit. Like it's so and in that sort of way, yeah, they could probably swing it. They could probably swing doing a little bit
Yeah,
better.
okay, we're repeating ourselves at this
Um
point. I think just
yeah, we are.
endlessly on this. All right, next question, which is going to be also relatively quick. Minus Yekindar plus Kyosuke thoughts. I have zero belief, like it has to be pure belief that Kyosuke, a 16-year-old Russian, 17 at best, speaks English to the level where he's going to be playing in international Counter Strike. I believe in his talent. He is one of the most talented players I've ever watched. Probably the most talented player I've ever watched, because I didn't do demo study on s1mple, and if I want to now, I probably couldn't because the demo breaker's broken, demo watch is broken. So pretty much think of it like that. He is probably the most talented rifler that's ever existed. Only conversation is him or Donk. Just they are both that nuts. So yeah, it probably could work if you just put him on the team and told him to do whatever the fuck he wanted. I just don't think it's a reasonable expectation or idea. Anything to add on that?
No, I think Yusuke, the plus out of this is probably the downside. I think Yekinder staying or leaving. I think I think it probably comes down more to I'm not sure you need anyone who is going to do donk numbers in those sort of roles because you already have a twist, you already have a NAF, and you already have an ultimate. You could do a bit better. You could put someone in there, who could be the rain to these kind of players. Not today rain, previous rain. And Yekinder isn't really that right now. But I don't think Kyusuke is the guy. So next question.
Yeah. Current PC specs. I don't know why. Just curious. I can throw mine out. I've got a Ryzen 7 3800X processor, 16 gig of RAM, and an RX Vega. I think 5.6 or 6.4. Let me check. It doesn't actually tell me in my drivers. It just says RX Vega. Let me check my Amazon orders because I just bought this off Amazon.
Mm.
RX Vega. I'll tell you exactly which one. I've got an 8 gig Vega 5.6. There you go. That's what I've got.
Yep.
And whatever that is, that combination, that juju, I don't have massive performance issues with Counter-Strike 2. So there you go.
Yeah, I have an RTX 2060. I have a Ryzen 5 3600 and 60 gigabytes of RAM, and I pretty much need to run CS on lowest settings to reach 144 FPS, which is the refresh rate of my monitor. Which is not
Oh,
always
rookie
fun.
error. Just buy a shitter monitor. God.
I once you go 144, you cannot go back. You just cannot. I would never win a game ever again in my life. I've been looking at an upgrade just for fun. I think I need. I was just looking at buying a new PC, to be honest. I want something out of the 40 series. I want a processor out of the Ryzen 700 kind of range. And yeah, just splurge on a new computer because why not? But it's expensive, and I might wait.
Yeah. I have no idea what the refresh rate on my monitor is. I just realized I've never bothered. I never gave a crap.
Probably 60 in that case.
It probably is 60.
Yeah.
I don't know. All I care about is that my PC works. And I can put up my incredibly average Counter-Strike performances without having to cry about it on Reddit. So, yeah, all good. All right, final question is from MF Vondas, who has asked, this is a bit of a weird one because I was not aware this sort of happening. But apparently Snacks called out Chopper. Me, I don't watch the broadcast beyond the game. I don't really typically find the desks very interesting, especially not these days where it's always the same. We'll see about Eliza Masters Espu. If you know, you know. That's going to be an event worth watching. But otherwise, I don't take that much interest in it. So when this happened, I wouldn't know. But the question that I care about is the end part: is which Russian-speaking IGL should Spirit get? This is under the assumption they've cut Chopper because they've decided Chopper's shit. Pretty simply. And I don't know because most of the teams I watch and follow that are Russian are very tier 2. I'm taking looks deep down in the rankings when I'm watching Russian Counter-Strike. So I'm not really sure I have a great suggestion beyond Shalfie. And I just think Shalfie's a great pick just because he is mechanically adept and he's had, a bit of a run with some teams that's been fairly impressive, but there's not a lot to go off really for him. So I don't know, Quacke, do you have a good pick for this?
No, I don't. I refuse to believe Snacks outcalled Chopper. So
Oh, is that the meaning of the question?
no.
Out call. Ah, yes, not call out. I'm silly, my bad. No wonder I didn't.
Ah,
I thought it was a call out, not that he outcalled him, which isn't probably true. Gonna be
I thought it was.
honest.
I thought it was. I thought it was outcalled. I don't think Snacks outcalled Chopper whatsoever because even if G2 were more tactically sound than Spirit in that game, even if that was the case, Snacks was probably quiet in TeamSpeak. It was probably someone else. Probably more likely somebody else. But if I'm gonna replace Chopper, I think there are some question marks around Chopper. I think he.
Yeah.
I won't say I think you need to cut him, but I think come a year's time, it might be a very bit different picture where Chopper absolutely needs to get cut. And
Yeah.
at that point, yeah, I think I don't have a particularly good picks. I do think it could be. I do think a Nafany pick could be on the cards again.
Boy.
Um, I think I just don't we'll see how BetBoom will develop. They haven't done much so far, but yeah. I
Hmm.
think Shalfie is a very good pick. Um, Honestly, I think Boom Bench wouldn't be the worst idea.
Yeah,
Um,
honestly, I don't want to cut Chopper from cutting Chopper. I want to cut Chopper and Hallie.
mm,
Get me a coach who isn't so obsessed with blundering the prep and getting everything wrong as apparently he is in his own interviews. And
mm,
then get me an IGL who can work with him. So maybe get me Shalfie and Zoma. Get me Boomich and
mm.
someone else. I don't really know who, but I think there's some
Here is
options.
one. Here is one,
Jerry and
Alpha,
Zoma?
because this kid
Alpha.
already played in Spirit Academy at one point. Yeah, he didn't play with Donk, unfortunately, but he was just after that. But this is already like Spirit tied. He's half decent. If Paravision do well, that's his stock very high because he's 19 years old. And imagine Spirit where there is no old guy, absolutely none.
Would be really weird, to
Just-
be honest.
yeah, because
Yeah,
he would drag their average age below 20 if he joined today. Yeah, which is kind of insane.
yeah, we'll see. I think there's also other questions to be had about the way they play, because it's always easy to like point at a guy like Zontix and be like, "Look, his numbers not good. When they were good, his numbers were good.
Mm.
Clearly, he's a problem player." But I also think, yeah, the way they prep opponents and the things they tend to deploy are just a bit weird and weak sometimes, and like they don't really make the most of some of these players. Donk especially, who just ends up having to do miracle work and sweet fuck all else. It's not like he's that well set up. So a lot of questions on that team. Just no clear replacement, I don't think, in the specifically Russian IGL space. Even if we extend it to like Belarusian and Kazakh, I don't think there's that many great options that open up. So, right, that wraps up the Q&A. That wraps up the Q&A. We need to get into the other stuff because that's a good 40 minutes. I mean, timestamps always going to be there. We're going to go into the small site retake. Quack, what have you picked out as your small little thing this week that really matters?
My little thing for this week is Alliance Academy, because I've probably talked about this previously before slightly. Alliance Academy, Alliance, the Swedish esports organization, they started a tryout for their own academy team where they held a ladder on esportal, which lasted almost a month. The bankruptcy of esportal sort of put a spanner in the works. They had to shorten it by a week. But they that's saved, by the way, in case you missed it. But yeah, anyway, they picked out the rule was like, oh, we're gonna pick out the top 8 players out of the ladder and then hand pick 12 which we felt have been good after looking at them. And that's what they did. I had 2 friends who got picked out. One of them who just grinded the hell out of this ladder because he is absolutely unknown. Nobody knows who he is. But he's a very good player. And then they shortened after a month. They had a bunch of prac with all of these guys, and after a month, after feeling like, okay, these guys are good, these guys are not so good, they picked out 8. I have 2 friends who are in that group as well, because they went straight through, and they're doing very well. And what they did yesterday as like a final test is they put them into 2 rosters together with Hawk and Twist. These 8 basically split 4x4 into 2 rosters, and they played show matches. They played 3 maps of show matches, and I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a really cool way. Basically behind the scenes. Now, Hawk and Twist obviously have a bunch of information around this now. Hawk is the coach. They have a bunch of information. They have a coach for the academy as well. His name is Judas, and they are going to pick out 5 players who are going to be on this academy team, who are going to get 6-month contracts and are going to contest the BIOC event at the next DreamHack in Stockholm. And that's cool. I like this way of picking out an academy team for a region who probably need more academy teams, who probably need more investment in the lower regions, or in the lower echelons of the scene. It's not big. They are not big names. I can mention the ones I know. I know Sean and I know Straxter, and you don't know any of these guys because they haven't really played at a good enough level. But this is a very good way for them to show themselves. And a bunch of people were in here. Like, they've now played matches with Twist, and they've played matches with Hawk, and they got a lot of praise. For now. So I do hope they get selected, both of them, to this academy team. It would be really nice. And it's a nice head start for them because as much as this is not a team which is probably ever going to contest an HLTV game unless they win the DreamHack BIOC, it's still a very good stepping stone because people would look at them and go, yeah, these guys were, even if they don't get picked, these guys were like in the final round of the Alliance Academy, and that's a feather in the hat, I guess. It's a benefit. All of them are born in 2006 or younger, so it's also very much like the next generation, almost the male 09 generation. So I think we're looking looking good. That's just a
Yeah,
just a nice, interesting little project. If you're Swedish and didn't watch the games, I hope the replay is still up on Alliance Twitch channel because that you should watch that. It was really fun. And in the final round, Upe was standing in for one guy who had to leave early. In the final round of the final map, he got killed while he was holding a grenade, dropped it, and killed two of his teammates with the same grenade, which is
Jesus.
kind of a funny end to the entire thing. But yeah, there we
Okay,
go.
yeah, cool little project. Hopefully it works out for them,
Mm,
because Lord, does Sweden need some more functional tier 1, even tier 2 players. I'm going to be honest, it's a lot of crap.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, a nice way to do it. My little small site retake, it's a fairly big one considering it's a qualifier for a real event, but the European closed qualifier almost finished for ESL Challenger Katowice 2024, which is a pretty cool event. One I always keep track of because there's a lot of teams that are important that end up playing here. Like, sure, you get the ESL ranking invites, which at this event are Eternal Fire, MIBR, and Falcons, but then Bait making it through, which is huge, I think, for them to play another LAN and just keep working on them. And also making it through with NPL, fragging, calling, getting a lot out of Headtrick as well, who's really reborn in this Bait team as well. They've been basically the rebirth team. They need to rename themselves. Instead of Bait, just something to do with a Phoenix. Somehow I need to bring it in because NPL revived himself after being essentially used, abused, and thrown aside by Na'Vi. Headtrick struggled with like to really make a name for himself, to really establish himself as a legitimate tier 1 AWPer. On this team, he's been outstanding. And yeah, they smashed their way through to the Katowice main event. They will be playing there. They'll be joined by one of Saw or who's the other team? 3D Max. And that'll be a great event to follow if you're into that tier 1.5, tier 2 sort of Counter-Strike. Bait are a big team for me. I think they're a team who are going to be one of those very dangerous oppositions for teams like NIP, all the way up through to teams like Heroic in the coming RMR because they have qualified and they're on one hell of a streak and have a lot of talented players. So that's my small site retake. Can't wait for the Katowice main event. I'll be rooting for Bait the entire time.
Yeah, great team. We've talked about them a lot. They are just on the verge of like one of those teams who sit on the edge of being properly good. And I hope they can get there at some point. The RMR is going to be a big test for them. It's not the first time they are contesting an RMR event, and this is definitely the time they have the best squad to do so. And I hope they can make it into the major. Would be fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, also this Katowice event, them making it there is pretty fucking cool. I think that's an event where they might actually have a chance because you have Falcons with s1mple is probably gonna sweep it if I'm gonna be honest. Them or
In
Eternal Fire,
theory, you'd
but
hope so for
yeah,
s1mple's career, but
yeah,
I've
but
not got any concrete proof that he's a good player. I've not seen a damn thing that proves he
oh,
actually is s1mple, you know.
mm.
For me, he's currently
I kind of
Alexander or
want to.
someone. Who the hell, you know?
Yeah, I kind of want to go to Katowice to watch this event because this is now that I'm looking at it, MIBR also kind of dangerous here. This might actually be a good event.
This will be
It
a
is
banger,
just
yeah.
before. It is going to be just before the RMR. So maybe saving some strats. But yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. Because
Nice
there's
of them to
Monty
qualify.
there as well. Like
Yeah.
so many good, just talented players here. Like Eternal Fire, who are currently
Yeah.
6th in the world on HLTV. MIBR with their new Lucalzi edition. Falcons with s1mple. We'll see what
Yeah.
that comes of it. Bait, Monty. Like, yeah, this is
Yeah.
going to be a banger.
And Monty won't hold anything back because they have no RMR or anything to prep for. Instead, they have nothing else to focus on. They can just go all out in this event, and maybe they can do well there. Anyway, Bait in with a chance for the win, I think. So, or at least a deep run, which would be fun. It would be fun to see Bait play like a grand final against s1mple or against Eternal Fire. That would be cool. So yeah,
Honestly, this is like a crazy just collection of Ukrainian players. If you look at it, like,
yeah,
can you imagine the dream team you can make out of this? If s1mple is on top form with the AWP, then you have like guys like NPL as a caller, fragger, absolute beast. Alex666, who's been a really key piece for Bait. Demka on Monty, who is a tier 1 rifler just stuck in a weird like contract hell, I think. Like, why is he still here? Why is he learning Polish? Go play for someone else. You could be such a good
yeah,
player. So if you can picture that sort of dream team come together, it'd be insane. But obviously
yeah.
Falcons would never let s1mple go. just that easily.
That would be
And he probably
nice.
wouldn't take the downgrade.
That would be nice, but they wouldn't have breakfast with NPL.
Oh shit! Yeah, alone for breakfast once again. Oh,
Yeah,
what a
the
shame.
breakfast hub.
Okay,
One
there's
member.
one big event going on this week. A really big event. Well, they want it to be a big event. Do they even? The Blast Spring Finals. It's weird. I always have a little thing to say about how Blast market their events, and this is the Spring Finals. It has been a weird event. It obviously starts with the huge controversy of Astralis cheating. We covered that last weekend, and unfortunately, they have used the Integrity Commission they're handling this. We can't do anything now, sort of excuse. So we were not going to hear really anything about it for months and months. Nothing will come of it.
Yep.
We talked about this earlier. But then we actually get into the Counter-Strike itself, and finally a little bit of karmic justice in the world, as Vitality hang, draw, and quarter Astralis. 13-0, 13-4. I think those 4 rounds were a bit generous. Should have kept it clean. I mean, come on, lads. Step up a bit. 13-0, 13-0 would have been a lot better. But that's the perfect way for the event to kick off, I think. Then in the other games, obviously, the group stage mostly played out how you'd expect. You know, Na'Vi beat Falcons. Yep. G2 beat FaZe. The way FaZe have been playing, not surprising at all. And then Spirit losing to Liquid. At this point, is anyone that surprised? Realistically, this has kind of been the form Spirit have been on. We expected them to bounce back. A lot of us expected them to bounce back. That was the vote as well from a lot of the people, a vote of confidence that they would bounce back. They basically haven't. It's been rough. But we end up with a playoff bracket. G2 Spirit and FaZe Liquid in the quarters. And then Vitality and Na'Vi waiting in the semis. G2 crush Spirit. Like 2-0. I mean, Mirage's OT, 13 on Dust 2. It doesn't feel like much for crushing, but when you watch it in person, and Donk's just getting out-dueled by Nico, and it's absolutely a stomping if you look at that matchup historically. You see m0NESY dropping 50 frags in 2 maps, and no one on Spirit really able to match them toe for toe. It's rough. Where are we with Spirit at this point? Like, are you believing in them in any way? Are they just a? Is this roster going to bounce back, or are we just waiting for changes?
I think there there may be a change. Maybe not in the winter, but at some point I think maybe there is going to be a change. But I also do think that this is a team which is going to stick around. I don't think we're going to end up with a point where they completely fall out of it and get picked apart for, scraps. I think they can still have a strong finish to this year. I think the way they've played this year, they really do go up and down. Like, they have some events where they look really good. They have some events where they don't look good at all. I mean, yeah, we'll see. I guess we'll just see. I think they could still have a strong finish to the season. I think maybe the major's on their mind. And I can't really put them out of the win contention there, like, entirely. I think they're not the favorites, but I absolutely think they can still win the major. So we'll just fucking have to see, especially the fact that they have been very strong against Na'Vi in the past. That's definitely, something speaking in favor of them for winning more events for the rest of this year.
Yeah, I mean, Na'Vi seem destined to just be in grand finals. That's somewhere you're going to have to face them.
Yeah.
We see it again this time. They faced FaZe after FaZe 2-0 Liquid, which was, I think, for Liquid, a bit of a slap in the face. Like, yeah, you've been sort of edging towards contention, but you're not quite there yet. As I put it last time, these guys are the Guardians. They are the test for the top 10. But then Na'Vi take care of business against FaZe. Sure, dropping Inferno. For me, when I was watching the game, and I saw Ancient getting a bit close, I was like, are you all right? Come on, guys. Should be better than this. But no, they stomped them on Anubis to join G2 in a surprise grand final as G2 upset Vitality with a Mirage overtime win. An absolutely fantastic Nico performance and one of the greatest almost 1v5s I've ever watched. Ending in a bloodied hand, which some people were a bit whiny about. I don't give a shit. Smash your desk. I do it. It's a part of being into the game, when you're frustrated, you're feeling a lot of pressure. You almost deliver one of the most beautiful rounds of Counter-Strike Nico's played in a long time. And the last shot of all the shots, when Apex isn't looking at you, that's the one you don't put in the head. Yeah, smash that fucking desk. I'm okay with this. Draw some blood. He still made it work. Still ends the series with a 1.47 rating. Monster performance from Nico. Outstanding from MalbsMD as well, who kind of gets unsung just due to how amazing Nico was. A stunning win for them, but one we all knew they were capable of just because of the individuals and some of Vitality's inconsistencies.
Yeah, one of those inconsistencies is Spinks. I gotta say, in yesterday's game, some of the other players definitely didn't show up either. It was mostly the ZywOo show, but just a pattern over this entire roster and this past period of whatever. Spinks doesn't show up out of the like. Nero has a thing for this. It's the elimination games and arena games statistics database. Spinks is the player who drops off the most next to ZywOo, but ZywOo is already, even when he drops off, he's like a 125 and you can get away with that. But Spinks, he just keeps disappearing in important games, and I think that is maybe the difference maker, especially in a tight game as this. If Spinks is up there, where like he probably should be on all three maps, Dust 2, he kind of completely disappeared. And yeah, I think if he's up there, maybe this is an entirely different game. But I think, I mean, it also goes for some of the other players. I mean, Flamesy was kind of nowhere on the final map. And
Yeah, that's the thing. When I come
T-Star-
to the end of this, you look at
Yeah.
the matchups, you think, oh, m0NESY wasn't that crazy. That's kind of been a part of G2's winning formula recently. But then you look at
Yes.
the two riflers who get over 60 kills in a 3-map series. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, two entry players who are dropping 1.4 ratings. How on
Yeah.
earth are we supposed to match up with this? It's so difficult. No matter how weak Snax and Hunter are. Snax was actually higher rated than Hunter this series, which is, come on, Hunter, but you're supposed to be a big stage player. You have been in the past, but still,
Yeah.
G2, yeah, with these two guys doing that, sure, you can win games. Fucking anyone is your IGL, you can go win games with that. Like, come on, what a ridiculous performance.
Yeah. It is. It's obviously difficult for Vitality, but I keep looking at Spinks, and I feel like if they had kept Magisk instead of Mezzy, Spinks would stand out as the worst player on this team, I think, for his positions and for what he's doing. Just barely, because he's still doing okay most of the time, but it just keeps coming up to these important games, and I think Spinks kind of disappears. And yeah, I don't know what to do. I don't know if they should replace him. I think they're in a very tough spot in that regard. But yeah, nice of G2, and now we go into another finals, which Navi is going to win because they are going to take their 10th win against G2, and there is no question about that in my mind.
Please don't say that. I mean, I really want Navi to win this just because I just like the way they've been playing. I like the idea of us having an era, or like basically would be an era. If they go and win this event as well, then win the major, you have to start talking like era-wise. You're not talking about just the number one team. They have been
at that point, they're basically matching 2021 Navi, I think.
Yeah, I mean, nowhere near as dominant. But the interesting part for me is that they'd be essentially their two best pieces, probably our IGL coach. Like, Bit, JL, Immer have all been really good, and they've had great success recently, especially. But my word, do you not consider these top players, even now, I don't consider them to be the most talented, the most skilled, the best at their spots for riflers. There are better riflers in the world. It's just the system, the calling, the freedom, the way they've actually been able to like use their own input and brains and the freedom they've been allowed to just create this beautiful Counter-Strike game. I think they deserve a lot of credit as a roster for that IGL coach duo. They're going to receive all the accolades this year. They deserve every single one as well. It's been outstanding. Yeah, hopefully they can take it home.
Yeah. I mean, look, G2 will probably make it close. They'll probably win a map. It's maybe even 2. It's a best of 5.
Eternal Fire could make it fairly close in a BO5 against them last time. I think there's a chance that this one goes 5 maps.
Yeah. And like, if I was a bookie, will definitely say that G2 have a reasonable chance of winning. It's just that I just don't think they won't. I think Navi will take the 10th win. I think when you have a 9-0 record, why would Navi lose now? But yeah.
Because it's a BO5, it's a big stage, there's narratives, there's pressure, all this stuff is why it could. I mean, it's also Blast, maybe the opponent's coming in feeling like, oh, this is a good time to just establish ourselves, play loose, play fun. The opposition have some crazy talents. There's a lot of reasons. I just think I'm just rooting for them. That's basically I'm rooting for them.
Yeah. I think Bit is starting to enter the conversation of being a very, very, very good player. Past 3 months, he's 125, and he is sort of in the same place where maybe Rops or Jimpat would also be, and I think he beats both of them at the moment. So I think he might be the
Oh, by
best
a long
player in the
shot.
world for his role. Yeah,
Yeah,
for his role, I think he might be the best player in the world right
yeah,
now.
that's fair.
Yeah, so he's definitely still up there. But that's also, over the year he was one of the guys who was kind of slumping over the whole year. So I don't think
Yeah,
I think JL is going to be the guy who makes it into the top 5 out of the Navi guys. But yeah, it's yeah.
yeah. We'll see. We'll see. The MVPs will decide a lot, and then also we'll have our personal, I think, top 20s. We might do a special episode where we just do
Yeah,
like our own sort of top 10 or top 20s. That'll be curious.
I
Just
want
to
to
see
do
how it
that.
compares to HLTV. See who's the more independent thinker. All right. But let's go on to what is pretty much already my favorite topic, my favorite subject, my favorite segment. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for, because it's all about who I think is a legitimate threat. These are the King's tiers. I have spent another pair of weeks deciding these. We've got thematic names, we've got a few movers, but also, yeah, just some new faces. I've decided to be more cutthroat. I've just got rid of some teams that I thought, oh, they were on the bottom row just because they kind of had to be. Nah, I've just cut the chaff. So, bottom row, this is the teams that need a pit stop. These teams need to make a change. The tires are worn out. There's maybe the engine's good, but nothing else really makes any sense. You need some fresh numbers, some fresh pieces. That's complexity in Falcons. Uh, Falcons already starting that process with the S1mple move as a loan. We'll see how that works out for them, but that's already them agreeing with this placement. Next up, these are rosters with engine trouble. It's, in theory, everything you look at on paper is good. Like, you think structurally, this is about right. Fraggers are there, stars are there, there's even some callers. But teams like Virtus.pro, Astralis, and Furia do not ever get it right. And it's just like something's just not quite coming together. Something's ticking around. You hear it. You're like, what's that noise coming from my engine? It's the team not quite finding the success they need. And I do have these teams, controversially maybe, ahead of Complexity, even though Complexity probably has been winning the matchups. I just think that Complexity are in more dire straits, and they will fall off more than people expect. Next tier up, the Dirty Air struggles. I'm going to show you the team straight away. These are rosters who aren't quite able to break into the top 5. They aren't able to make top 4s at events. They aren't able to win events. I mean, Eternal Fire have that one final run that kind of carries them even to here. And there's no doubting the talent. It's just, can they ever really make that big of an impact up the top? For now, they're stuck here. They probably need to keep working, get themselves into a slightly better position relative to their competition, and try to make those overtakes happen. Number 2, it's the Dust Cloud. These are the guys chasing. These are the guys making all that dirty air. That's so hard to get past. And there's 4 teams here. Vitality, Spirit, G2, Mouse, all of whom have kind of fallen off the leader. They are definitely doing a great job of holding their own, staying relevant. A few blips here and there, like Mouse recently, just taking a bit of a dip, not performing great at Cologne, and then obviously not being in the Blast Spring finals. But they're still, I think, around there in terms of their quality of players, the runs they've had in the past. But they aren't quite good enough to really challenge Pole. I put for now, but Pole is Na'Vi. They are number 1. They are leading the pack. And honestly, sure, they lost one best of 5 final to Vitality. But generally, they're making the finals and they're winning these events. They've been outstanding this season. I don't think it's really much of a contest. They have finally separated themselves from the pack in my eyes, having won Pro League. And I think they're going to go, well, at least as favourites into the major coming soon. Whether or not they actually win it still remains to be seen, but it can't be denied anymore. They are number 1. They are the favourites at every event. Come and get them. All right, Quacke, is it a perfect set of tiers? Do you have nothing to say other than to just weep at its beauty? Or do you have some criticism? I'd be surprised if you were sat there thinking, wow, Kingt is such a genius. How do I even get to be on this show?
I think you put Navi exactly right. I think
Okay.
Navi are absolutely the best team in the world right now. And yeah, they are definitely on pole. As for the Dust Cloud, yes, Vitality Spirit G2, I would absolutely put them in there. They are absolutely there in the chase. Now, what I'm going to put down is Mouse, because
Okay.
Mouse have not made a top 4, which wasn't bullshit, in over 3 months. Because for their past 3 events, they have gone into ESL Pro League and bombed out in groups. They have gone to BetBoom Dacha, somehow gotten knocked out. They have gone to IM Cologne. They did make top 4. Actually, I did lie. My bad. But
Yeah.
they
I
didn't
was about to ask
didn't
what was
exactly look
bullshit
inspired.
about Cologne, because I was like, that was pretty good.
Well, okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. They didn't exactly look inspired though. And they also had a very easy one to playoffs. Basically the only win they had, which probably mattered, is against G2 in the quarterfinal. Which is a very up and down team. Anyway, and then I mean, yeah, Esports World Cup, that is the bullshit one because they only had to beat Sashi and Furia to make it top 4. Which is not exactly a huge hurdle to get over. I would probably move Mouse down at this point. I think Mouse are absolutely on a decline. I think they're going to turn it around. I hope they're going to turn it around because I want to see this team stay together for 2025, but I think they are going to. Liquid, Eternal Fire, FaZe, yes, absolutely teams I would put in the same sort of bracket. I would absolutely put them to be possible to make those deep rounds, but they just haven't just yet. And yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there with VP, Astralis, and Furia because everything looks so perfect. Like you look at these rosters, and these are the dream rosters that people would put together a year ago, 2 years ago. These are like the dream rosters for what they're trying to do: Russian, Danish, Brazilian, and they just aren't fucking working out. Something is wrong. And yeah, pit stop needed. One of them has made it. When is complexity's change going to come? Post major, like, do you see a complexity change there?
There has to be. There almost has to be. I mean, they're going to
Yeah.
get the major sticker money, and at that point, you kind of have to be like, yo, you can't need that much funding to buy out some NA talents or make some changes. I'm not expecting them to go and hit a grand slam straight off the bat. Like, first pitch, boom, fucking send that thing 450. No, I'm not expecting that. But yo, you can't just sit here, trying to get a walk and striking out at every event. You've got to at least lay down a bunt, hit a single, try something, cut Floppy or Grim. I get it. You love Stuart Little and Bob the Minion, but they're not that good. At this point, you've got to take a risk on someone else, take a flyer, and try and make it work. Otherwise, you can always abandon this idea of being North American. There is so much talent in EU. I'm sure there'll be some buyouts you could afford in terms of the talents that we have lying about. Go take some risks. I mean, hey, let's put it this way. Let's say if Revenant never get their shit together, if you tell me you can go get Reiko and Nivera, do it. Do it. They are crazy talents who far outperform the level the orgs managed to reach. So there are options for them to go and pick up. I think they just haven't yet pulled into the pits. They're staying out on these worn out tires, and they're losing a lot of time because of it. Yes. Clear racing theme. I tried my best. Not a very big Formula One or other racing sports guy. So some of these things don't really make much sense, but they make sense to me as a casual.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah, I mean, look, complexity, they even have a change in the bag. Like, they could make one change for European and still stay North American in the same way Liquid and Wildcard are doing. Go for it. Fucking go for it. There's very few reasons not to at this point. Well, at this point, the one reason is roster lock, but after the major, I mean, because that's sort of where our head is.
Yeah.
All top level roster changes need to be in the mind space of next year at this point. So yeah, I hope they make something happen.
Yeah, it would be great to see them back in real contention. Get NA another good team, or a good team, I think, because it's almost difficult to see Liquid as North American anymore. It's 2 Canadians, and that's about it. Doesn't really feel the same.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's
Based in the Netherlands, yeah.
let's wrap that up and let's move on to the Eternal Shuffle. Now, I was going to make a whole topic of this, but I realized we keep talking about it, so we're just going to lead off with it. The first move is the Falcons S1mple loan, which I don't. When I first saw conversations happening, we saw the Nico move. It's not really 100% confirmed, but it's as good as, and it will happen. Just because it hasn't been announced by the big orgs themselves, doesn't mean it hasn't been signed as reported. So we then see the S1mple part of the rumor, and I was just confused because the initial way it was framed when this was leaked was, we want S1mple and Nico. It's like having Ronaldo and Messi. But is it? Because I don't remember, like, late prime Messi and the idea of matching him up with a kind of like 2 years off Ronaldo. Like, what is this? How does that
Mm.
metaphor really work? It doesn't make sense to me, because Ronaldo never had that sort of long-term injury, or well, in this case, long-term absence from the game by choice. And I do think that whilst in his prime, I think Ronaldo's a bit of an insult to s1mple. I'm not a Ronaldo guy. I'd call him the Messi of the sport, but still, what matters is it seems like a big risk to take if they just signed him next year. But loaning him, taking him on another loan, a 3-month period where you can at least test the waters, I think is reasonable, a fair idea, and it gives them a chance to really work him back into shape for that incoming Nico. That's the way I see it, and I think they've done a good job.
I think that's a good job because hold your horses, we are not getting simple Nico yet. The loan ends basically when Nico is going to come in, so a lot could happen. A lot could happen. The door is not closed on Falcons Monacy, I don't think. I
Okay,
do
fair.
think a lot of people say that like once Nico leaves, obviously Monacy is also going to leave, and he might just follow Nico. I don't really think that is the case. I think he has a lot of reasons to stay in G2 as well. But especially because Falcons is a risk, and basically every other team who could get him, um, that's also a bit of a risk. I think he has a good chance of just staying with G2, kicking it with Molbs, and maybe they manage to get a decent replacement, um, replace Snacks, whatever. But, like, I think he has reasons to stay in G2 as well. But anyway, it doesn't close the door on that because it is just a loan, and I think it goes really well for z1mple, even if Falcons don't end up signing him because somebody else might. He's going to be expensive, but somebody else might just go for him. I think there's a chance, if Falcons do end up going for Monesi, I think G2 could go for z1mple. I don't think that's impossible.
Depending on how he looks, yeah, not absurd.
Yeah. I think if we end up with yeah, and I mean, yeah, this is an interesting move. It's a very interesting move, and I think it is a move which could put Falcons into major playoffs. Outside candidates for sure, but it definitely could get there, if things do sort of line up. And then it's really interesting, especially with Nico there for the next year. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just nice to have z1mple back. I think it's very nice to have z1mple back on playing
Yeah.
Counter Strike. Different dimension to this move. Sun Pius, quality player, could probably hang. I think if he could hit his peak form, which he couldn't really hit in Falcons, I think if he could hit that end sort of level, I would put him in the conversation with someone like Brokey. I would probably put him up there. A Torji, that sort of thing. Does he have a space in the top
If
five? Do you think, like
if
for
he's
next year, top
back, if
10?
he can hit his CS::GO level, he's higher than both of them. But for
Yeah.
now, we have his CS2 Sun Pius. Yeah, there's teams that could probably do with having him. They're just not going to be, I think, in our top sort of 5. They're going to be slightly lower down. Maybe FaZe lose Brokey for whatever reason, move on from him. Maybe Complexity with fresh money can make him an offer. That could be interesting.
Mm,
There's things like that to
that could be
consider.
interesting.
He's always going to have, I think, a team willing to take a risk on him just because of he wasn't just good on ENCE. He was the best player on ENCE, despite even having nerds on the team. Like, he
Mm.
was outstanding. And I think I made this point on a video that I don't think's actually been released. So no spoilers for what video it is, but I talk about this quite a bit with some other people. And I think he has got yeah, people will take a flyer based on his old performances, which were ridiculous. So yeah, that video's not out, so I'm not going to spoil what it is. But watch this space for incoming conversations about potentially some Pius, and other things Falcons related.
There is a lot of people were saying heroic. Do you think Sun Pius is a clear upgrade over Dexter right now?
Not right now.
Because I'm not sure he is.
Unfortunately, not
Um,
right now. He should be, because
mm,
Dexter's been bad since coming into CS2 because of his big break and getting used to the new game. So if this was ENCE, some Pius, or even something close to, yes. But it's really not been. It's been a very up and down. Like, he's had flashes, he's had series, but he's just not been that great. So it's marginal upgrade at best, and probably not a risk I'd take as heroic.
Counterpoint, it maybe would be S1mple because you have Saw, you have nerds, you have players who might be more comfortable with him, or who might make him more comfortable, put him back
More
into that
comfortable
form.
than Snappy and Madden. Like, no, I don't. I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. It's the Snappy system has always made AWPers thrive, despite and it's been a great litmus test for how good an AWPer really is how well they can perform with Snappy. It's why Hades kind of fell out of tier 1. Like, he was decent, like his numbers look good, but you clearly could tell that he wasn't that ready. He might be ready now. He's certainly put a lot of work in. But no, I think Snappy is a great IGL. Madden is his workhorse that he's had for a while. If he should be comfortable anywhere, it's here. I just don't think. Potentially, okay, it may come out later that, like, oh, it's a very Zonic influence system. There's differences how he runs it. Magisk has a lot of control through the Zonic influence, and it's not quite Snappy's team in the way we'd imagine it. If that's the case, potentially you're right. But I'd assume otherwise. I've heard that the team, like the way the players play, is more Snappy's project than the roster construction, which is the Zonic part of it. So that's something to consider. I don't see it as a clear upgrade.
Yep. All right.
Yep. Fnatic have cut Afro and have signed Nork on loan, which I've tweeted about this. I consider to be a clear upgrade. I've had some people push back, basically trying to call Nork mid. I think that's been the consensus, that Nork in tier 1 is mid. The problem is Afro in tier 2 is not that special, and in tier 1 is pretty dog shit. And all in all, eye test wise, I'm talking about a player who is maybe not titillating to you as a highlight enjoyer, but as a player doesn't make constantly terrible decisions, who takes good picks, hits his shots, maybe doesn't break the game as often as you may like from a tier 1 AWPer. That is something we always comment on. We want players who take big risks, hit big shots. Nork probably hasn't been that in a lot of the tier 1 teams he's played for, but he's been really good. Just as a baseline, just really good. I see it as an upgrade. I'm not sure it's not the best time to sign him, obviously. He's a couple years past those times when he was on tier 1 teams, playing good Counter-Strike. But I still have faith in him, and I think Fnatic have got an upgrade, like an addition by subtraction, and then an addition on top of it. Like, it's a good cut, good add. They should only get better.
Yep. It's a good signing, I think. I hope it becomes full-time afterwards, because he really needs to get out of that knock. Really need to get out of that bleed nightmare. Interesting thing. I think pound for pound, this is the best roster Knock has ever had, for the players that are here. I think, because if you look back, he played with a team that was basically Hampus, Rez, Klopski, and either Twister or ZTR. He was in the middle of that change. And pound for pound, I think this current Fnatic roster with Mattis, BlameF, Crims, Body, I think that beats that. Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a problem. You're probably actually entirely right. If I take those teams and put them head to head, that's probably better. But relative to the era they're playing in, it's far less cut and dry, and I'd argue
yes,
probably isn't the case. Just because back then that team was fairly skilled, it just never put the pieces together. That's the problem I have with that take.
Probably. I still think, if you put Mattis to Plopsky, I think Mattis wins. I think if you put BlameF to Rez, I think BlameF definitely wins. Body to Hampus, I think Hampus wins. And then that support piece, Crims is always going to win, I think. But you have some other rosters, like we have the Bleed roster, also very like skilled pound for pound, I think. You have Jacob, Cypher, Hampus again. You have the Apex roster as well. In hindsight, JL being there kind of weighs quite heavy. But I still think, this is, if things click, which they might, this could be the team where Nok finally has like the most tier 1 success than he's had in the past. And that would be great. That would be amazing. It's some ways off. It's an outside chance, but it might start with a good performance in this major.
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction. I'm always going to be rooting for Fnatic when they've got essentially a prospect on their team in Mattis. So yeah, hopefully they can deliver. And I am genuinely impressed with the way they've sort of kept upgrading pieces. I think this was a good move. Up
Yeah.
next, MIBR. We finally have confirmation of who Lukowski's coming in for. And it's as I hoped. No offense, Breno, but I wanted you to be cut, and you were. BR Enazan cut. Lukowski is coming in. This roster was already dangerous, was already, punching up in a lot of games. Ignore domestic results, as always, because Brazilian domestic results are basically a dice roll and complete nonsense. But they are playing at the Americas RMR. They're playing at Challenger Katowice. This team is going to be threatening. I think they just took one of their problem pieces who hasn't been performing, who takes a lot of cheap deaths, bad deaths, and they brought in a guy who has been a monster, mostly in Brazil. Haven't seen him much outside of Brazil. But it has to be an upgrade. This is going to be one of the most scary Brazilian teams to play against in years. Not necessarily because they are tier 1 guaranteed, but just because in any given moment, they have like 4 different guys who could absolutely bang you out.
Yep. Top 10 contender straight out of the gate, I think. Especially with the way they played in ESL Pro League. They're going to be really dangerous. Lukowski as well. We haven't seen him out of Brazil so much. I think the one standout moment was when they made the fall final in the Americas Showdown, which at that point was quite big because this was a newly formed Fluxo team. It was basically their first event. They beat some decent teams. Beat Zero Zero Nation, which at that point was the Cold Zero roster, and Taco. Beat Evil Geniuses, who at that point I think they hadn't quite fallen into the way bottom because they were still like 22nd in the world. They were like just on the edge of it was the start of that downfall. And then they beat MMBR in the final and they made it into the Blast Fall final where they obviously went last. But I remember this. This was in 2022. I remember this event and they played half decent. They played an overtime map against Navi, which was still it was the STY roster of Navi.
Yeah.
And they also played an no, sorry, this wasn't over. Neither of them were overtimes. They would have been overtimes today. They were 16-14s. They were 30 maps, and they did the same against G2 in the lower final, which at that point was JKS and Hooksy. It was the good G2. Yeah, they played a very good game. They play, I think, and then it just sort of really didn't really work out. They never really got those results again. The domestic results weren't really there. They paid a lot of money to make this roster happen. They absolutely did. They Lukowski was let me see if I remember the number. I think they paid 300,000 for him from Sharks. And they paid like $1.5 million for the entire roster as a whole, which is insane. Now, MIBR have probably paid a pretty big chunk for Lukowski as well. He's a good player. He's kind of the next Case Zerato, I think. And he has been for a while. And him being an MIBR next to someone like Insani, next to Safe, who I think has been very competent. And then, exit and drop, putting up a good game. I think that's very exciting. And that's a team which is definitely up there with teams who are in the top 10 right now. You have teams like Complexity, Saw, Pain are on the edge of it. MIBR, I think, trump all those teams honestly straight out of the gate with the level we saw out of EPL and now with Lukowski. So I'm going to be really excited to see them at the major.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to them as well. I don't know. It's going to be difficult to judge, I think, going into it, what to expect at the Americas RMR. It's always a bit of a weird event. Yeah. You don't see these teams know each other, but they don't really play each other that often, and they don't play each other that often at LAN, between Brazil and NA. So it's always curious. Next up, Gamer Legion, to fill in the gap left by Andu, have signed Towson. Now, Andu leaves, and he says, one of the things that really led to him leaving was the fact that he wasn't allowed to play the roles he wanted to play. Like, he wasn't playing as aggressively as he was at first. Since Flammers came in, he has slightly fallen back in terms of his roles. Back in the, not necessarily pecking order, but back in the progression of things. He's no longer as heavy on the openings. And now Towson's here, who is a player from Ecstatic, right? I mean, Ecstatic keep making changes.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking, why? And then I see the replacement, and I'm kind of like, okay, that's not too bad. Because Towson's a talented guy, and he's already had a great start on Gamer Legion, playing yeah, slightly more aggressive than I think people expected, but this is a very limited sample so far. I'm expecting, yeah, Flammus to still be the hard entry, hard opener kind of guy. Towson's going to be a very much a sort of third best, fourth best player sort of zone. Uh, I don't think it's a bad pickup. I just, yeah, I don't know. I'm anxious to see how Game Legion play on LAN with this team. Uh, I feel like Andy was a really talented guy. It's going to be big boots to fill.
My gut feeling was that this was a really fucking weird signing, if I'm going to be
Mm,
entirely honest, because I
yeah,
have not been particularly impressed by Towson at any point, really. He was on Masonic, where he was like he was always in the shadow of a Buzz or a Sierra, who was also there for a while. Even Gensi, the Opper, who, I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people like him, and he has played a decent game at times. It just hasn't really worked out. Yeah, Sierra as well, and then and Lele,
and
uh,
Lele.
and Lele. Also played a very good game on this Masonic team. He just Towson never really did shit, if I'm gonna be entirely honest. He was always like the third or fourth best player of this team. He moves on to Sprout. He gets bought out for the Sprout Academy, where he goes back and forth between the Sprout main team and the Sprout Academy until they shut down. He didn't do much there. He didn't really move the needle for me in his level on Sprout. And then he moves on to Secret briefly, where he did play decent. But this is also, you know, playing decent on a nothing roster is a bit neither here nor there, I think. Um, yeah, I mean, good job beating Kindo and Nope J and Maze and Innocent. Like, good on you, I suppose. And then he moves on to Ecstatic and has been the best player there. So I think I don't think it's an unworthy pickup, but I did think that, like, you definitely could have done better than this, because the rumor I heard, and in hindsight, this might have been completely fake, but I heard they were trialing out Young Ninjas players, and I think they would have done so much better with a Joe Cab or with an ex Casper Sky than you do with a Towson. Um, so I'm not quite sure why they've ended up going with Towson, but then again, they are very good at scouting, so they might have seen something that I just can't
It
fathom.
might be a question of simply maturity, experience. You know, Towson's been around quite a
Yeah.
while. He's really played through academies. I mean, he was good on Ecstatic.
Mm.
I don't think he was the best player for me. The reason I picked out Nixon was because I thought Nixon actually did look fairly solid when I watched
Yeah.
that team play, and that's why prospect demo, of course, has been made for him.
Yeah.
But they've replaced him with TMB, who's coming into IGL. So I'm wondering who was calling before, given that he's coming straight away for Towson. And since then, you know, there's not really anything that lines up to me in terms of who that would be. But hey, I think Game Allegiant do a good job usually picking out players. I think he's the right kind of player, sort of the kind of player they need. Less aggressively, instinctively, that kind of guy. More willing to play the pack, play the
Mm.
trades, and just play good Counter Strike, because that's historically what Static have done. They've not signed particularly stunning individuals. They just had good leadership, and then fundamentals carried them through. So
Yeah.
maybe that's what they need.
Odd signing, I think, but good job. He's done good in his first week. 113 on Game Legion, coming second in CCT. If it works out, it works out. But I just
Mm-hmm.
think they could have done better on paper. But yeah,
Yeah, sure.
let's see. He's only 19. He's got a lot of development.
Yeah, he's not that old. He's not that old. Right, Godsent. This is a move you've put in that I will have zero thoughts on this. They've removed Frank with
Yeah.
3 A's, and they've added Viz, and no one has a picture on HLTV. No one's really played a HLTV match, like, in months. I have
No.
nothing to add to this. Like, who are these people?
I have Viz was there before. And I just wanted to put this in as a shout because they booted him for Frank when they stepped up from Young Gods into Godsent, and they basically were like, they had some issues with how he played. They were like, we've asked you to improve on these things and you didn't improve, so we're benching you. And then since then, Viz has played in a bunch of mixed rosters. He's played in a bunch of different things. He's played really well, and they've decided that, well, things aren't really working out with Frank either. We're gonna go for Viz. And that's really nice. And I just want to say good on you, Viz, for taking the chance to improve and do well. Another one of those really young Swedish players who sort of I can't remember if I think he's 18 or 19. He's 17 even. Jesus. Um, yeah, just this Gods and Roses. They aren't on HLTV just yet, but they continue to be very interesting. When they play at a high level, they play like when they play their best CS, they play really fucking good CS. But then they just have issues with consistency and stuff. And they played mostly Swedish stuff. They show up in like United 21 and stuff. And I don't think they might be slated for some playoff thing which might be HLTV covered soon. I'm not sure, but they play around in the European Pro League kind of thing and do half decent. But yeah,
Okay.
good job. Is all. Yeah,
Yeah.
good job, Viz, for
Yeah.
taking the chance to improve and come back.
Cool. Right. We'll see what comes of that because
Mm.
Godsend have a very long-term project on their hands. Finally,
Yep.
let's wrap up the show with prospects of the week, and I will let you take lead because I'm typing.
Yep, I have picked Kyusuke, which was an easy pick for this week. He's had a massive week. I haven't watched him because I've only watched games where everybody was already 25 or older, which is blast. I just don't. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to argue with the statistics they put up this week. We've talked about him at length. I honestly don't think I have much more to add than what has already been said. Um, he's an amazing player. And yeah, I can't say much. They're on a. Let me see how long their win streak is. They're up to.
It's not that
Oh, they're
long because
just
they
up to
lost to
5 games.
Navi Junior. They lost,
Yeah.
but they have picked up some more impressive scalps, and Kyosuke is phenomenally talented. I think
Yep.
that's the long and the short of it. I mean, they have a team with a bunch of other players who are solid, but realistically, it's hard to look past the guy taking the majority of the opening fights, the guy winning a lot of rounds just straight off the back of his multi kills, and the guy who, when you watch his POV, you think, holy crap, like, what in the bionic fuck is wrong with his arm? Like, how does he move his mouse like this? He's absolutely insane. And yeah, Kyosuke, an easy,
Yeah.
obvious pick. Can't complain about. Absolute monster. But this week, someone
3-0
has
in
had.
CCT.
They are. Someone has had a better week, though. And that is a little Brazilian man named Dumao, who, I'm going to be real, buddy. You need to shave. It's not working. I don't know what you're going for. But I can't complain about your Counter-Strike performances. Oh, wow. He has done absolute bits this week. And what's funny is that he's currently finding himself in this legacy team playing just traditional star rifle roles. And he's sort of transitioned away from the old. Because the Dumao of old was like, he wanted to be a hybrid. He wanted to AWP a lot more. He always picked up second AWPs. There were teams where he even just was the AWPer. And I was just like, oh, this is cool and all, but you're so much better on a rifle. And he's finally, I mean, this week, fully committed to it. I don't think he had a single AWP kill. Pure AK monster. And he's been able to carry Legacy to some really big wins. I mean, losing to Wildcard in the end in the Katowice North America qualifier was a shame, but it's not over for them. I do believe they have another chance to make it through. It's just a lower bracket game they have to win now, and then they get another shot at Wildcard to try and make it through themselves. But yeah, he's been unbelievable this week. I think he deserves another shout out because, yeah, historically we used to think of him as like the next guy up in Brazil. But recently that hype's died. You know, he's never really found the right team to move up with. A lot of the teams that try to bridge the like youth and tier 2 gap into tier 1 in Brazil have been horrendously poorly constructed and fell apart. So these are the teams he was on a lot of the time, the Godsends, the Double O Nations. I'm glad that here he's got another team. He's making a shot. He's taking a run at breaking into tier 1. They do they have the RMR coming up as well for them? Did they make it? I forget.
Yep.
They do.
Just
Okay, so
about.
great. We'll get to
Final
see
spot.
that.
Yep.
We'll get to see him in CCT North America, and we get to see him at the Thunderpick World Championship. So, yeah, big up Dumao, crazy talent, and what a monstrous week.
Never forget the days when they were playing for Godsent and literally everyone on the roster except for Taco was opping.
That was such a dumb team.
I think pretty much everybody had at least 10% op usage aside from Taco in that team. Excellent player. Has been an excellent player for up to 3 years now. and he's never really slowed down. Like he's always been in that like next up in Brazil. He's not it's just that other people kind of overtake him because you do have teams like Pain and whoever else who just kind of explode, and then you have players like ZB and the Skulls who just get those huge ratings. I feel like Duma has been very consistently sitting at that like 115 range for eternity at this point. And
Oh
there's been
yeah,
some team fuckery. Yeah, there's been some fucking about in different teams, sticking around with Lato, basically his whole career.
yeah,
Also a decent player, I think. Yeah, like Zero Zero Nation ended up on Legacy, Godsent before that. Yeah, is where people might remember him from Pandemic, Counter Strike.
yeah.
Um,
Sorry.
rem- yeah, yeah. They he's a very, 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 very good player. Let's hope that they do well at the RMR, because if Legacy make two, if they make two majors in the same year, I think they're kind of legit. But I also wouldn't hold a lot for that. I do think they aren't going to make the major. But yeah, let's see how they do. Duma with good performance, they can definitely make it.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating to watch that RMR because, as I said before, it's chaos. There's so many talented players, so many talented teams. It's always difficult to make it out. So that's a big event. But that wraps up the show. We kept it sub 2 hours this time. What a miracle. Still over an hour and a half, though. So our short little Sunday recap, as always, extending. But yeah, if you enjoyed, leave a like, leave a comment telling me your thoughts on any of the segments. We always appreciate feedback, although we're right and we never really see otherwise. I think that's kind of the conclusion we always come to. Yeah, members get access to more because they're better. They become a member today. It's £2 a month, I believe, is the current price. And that's the only tier. Nothing's extra hidden currently. Join, you get everything. So yeah, that's all for this week. We'll see you in the next week for another retake. Goodbye.